Hello students, welcome to the next lecture on the probability and statistics. Today I will explain you why there is a need of the measure of dispersions, what is the concept behind it and what are its various features. Myself Dr. Harish Garg, you can follow and subscribe my channel where you can find the playlist probability and statistics. As you can see, our last lecture was on the measure of center tendencies, mean, median, mode with the help of the several numerical examples as well. Now, what is the real motivations? Why there is a need of the dispersion? If I give you the one simple example, consider the two workers, worker 1 and 2, and recorded their earnings in a 1 week. Fine. So the information is given to you, and if you calculate the average of both the workers, average is I calculate as a mean. Fine. If I calculate the average of both the workers, then you can say how you can calculate the mean. Sum divided by the 6. So if you calculate the average of the first worker, you will get 125. If you calculate the average of the second worker, again you will get the 125. So since you can see the average earning is same 125, so can you say both the workers are really the same, or the performance in the terms of the earnings are really the same for both the workers? Definitely your answer is no. Why? Because the minimum earning of the worker 1 is 120 while the highest is 130. On the other hand, for the worker 2, minimum earning is 115, highest is my 135. So that means although the average earning is my same, but there is some dispersion. Dispersion in other words, you can say there is some spread. There is some spread from 120 to 130 or 115 to 135. So that means whenever you can compute the decision only based on the average, then the decision is not meaningful. Fine. Then the decision is not meaningful. So in order to make the decision as a realistic, we can add first of all mean, that is the center tendency, plus we can compute some dispersions so that we can compute a better decision as compared to the single earning, average earning. Fine. Or in other words, we can say the average is tell us only about where the data is concentrated at the center, but it does not tell us how the data is scattered in the given observations, and how you can measure, how to measure such scatterness. For measuring such scatterness, we need the concept of the measure of dispersion. The measure of dispersion is also known as the measure of the variations, or it is also known as measure of variability. So that means the measure of dispersion is basically used to compute the spread or to describe the degree of the spread or the variability around the central value. The central value is my either as a mean or as a median or as a mode, depending upon the central tendency you have chosen. For example, if I consider the two case study A and B, and if you calculate the, if I have the 5 observations 40, 45, 50, 55 and 60, if you calculate the mean, it comes to be the 50. On the other hand, if I compute the 5 numbers again, 20, 35, 50, 50, 65 and 80, again you can see the mean is my 50. Fine. So that means you can see the average value is my same. Fine. That means you are unable to make a decision. So can you make a decision based on the average? No, because in the both the cases not able to make a decision. डिसीजन तो तभी ले सकते हो ना जब आप दोनों को कंपैरिजन कर पाओ, तो इसके अकॉर्डिंग तो A इज इक्वल टू B हो गया, बट दैट इज नॉट पॉसिबल. Fine. So how you can make a decision? If you closely look about this information, if I call the first number is my x1, second number is my x2 and so on, and if you look at these x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, clearly say there is some spread or there is some gap between them. Fine. On the other hand, if you look about these green dots, clearly say there is a very less gap, or you can say there is a very less spread between them. So once there is a less spread, you can say there is a less dispersion, or called as the low dispersions in the case study A, while the high dispersion in case of the case study B. Whenever you have a high dispersion, the data is always the inconsistent and is a consistent whenever you have the low dispersion. Always remember, students, your target in the case of the dispersion is always to minimize the spread. Always. Fine. Is always to minimize the spread. Another example is, if you look about these two graphs, clearly say the average value considered as the same, and you can see the spread, that is called as the standard deviation, or simply called as the spread in the case study A is less as compared to the B. So that means the case study B has a larger dispersion as compared to the case study A. Fine. Or you can say the narrow and the tall curves has data is concentrated towards the mean, while the wide and the flat curve data is more spread out. Now, I will provide you the few examples, real life example, why the dispersion is important in our day-to-day life. Fine. So if you are the students of the manufacturing or students of the mechanical, physics, mathematics and so on, so I will provide you the various examples. So consider any one of the manufacturing plant and they manufacturing the two products A and B. Fine. So the two machines produce the boards. Let's say they produce the boards. The machine A produced the boards of 10.1, 10.0, 9.8 and so on, while the machine B has produced 8.5, 11.5 and so on. If you calculate the average of both the machines, then you can say average of both the machine is my 10. You can easily say अगर आप इसको add करोगे, that is a 50 divided by 5. Similarly, if you add the below number, is again the 50 divided by 5, that is my 10. So clearly say both the machines have the same number of the average. So if I ask you the one question, which machine would you buy? Can you buy at a random? Can you buy any machine at a random? Because average is same. So can you buy at a random? If you buy at a random, then your decision making or in the future you may have a loss. Fine. So you can never buy at a random. So how you can buy? You have to check which one is less dispersion or which one is more reliability. So how you can check about that reliability? So clearly say, if you look about this diagram, average of the machine is my 10 and all those other numbers which are very near to the 10. While in the case of the machine B, 8.5 is a very far away from the 10 as compared to the 9.8, 10.1 and so on. So clearly say you can prefer to buy the machine A because its products are more consistent towards the average of the 10. So that means how you can measure the consistency? The consistency is measuredness based on the dispersion. Therefore, you can say the dispersion measures the quality and the reliability. Second example, if I say you are investing some money in the mutual funds. Fine. So if you have the two mutual funds, fund A return is 10, fund B is again average return is by 10. So in which fund you can prefer to invest them? तो क्या आप randomly invest कर दोगे? You can never do that. You have to look about that. Fund A fluctuate between 9 to 11%, while the fund B fluctuate between the minus 20 to 10. So if you calculate the average of the fund A, so how you can calculate the average? 9 plus 11 divided by 2. Fine. That comes to 20 divided by 2 is a 10%. Similarly, if you calculate the average of the fund B, that will be minus of 20 plus 40 divided by 2. So that will again be the 10%. So that means, so which fund you can prefer to invest them? Definitely you can prefer for the fund A. Why? Because it has less variation. It has the less variation or less risk as compared to the -20 to 40, although they have the same return. So that means the dispersion is also measure the risk. The low dispersions means low risk. Similarly, if you predict about the weather conditions, like say average temperature of the two city is my 25 degrees Celsius. And if you measure the temperature of the city A, that comes to be 25 on the one day, 26, 26, 25 and 25. While for the city B is a 10, 15 and so on. And if you calculate the average of both the cities, it comes to be 25. Fine. क्योंकि आप इसका सम करोगे दैट्स 125 divided by 5, 125 divided by 5. So because the average temperature of both the city is same, so which city you can consider is a more stable weather and why? According to you, which city is more stable and why? Can you put a comment in the on the video? Definitely you can say the city A is more preferable or more stable. Why? Because it has a low dispersion, and the low dispersion means the more stable. Similarly, the importance of the dispersions is the in terms of the measure the consistency, measurement of the risk, comparing the two different data sets. You can make as a quality controls, and finally you can make a decisions, and that's the most important factors involving in the dispersion. For example, in case of the measuring the consistency, that means what does the meaning of the lower dispersion? Your target is to make the dispersion is always to the minimum. The low dispersion implies high consistency. Fine. And high dispersions implies less consistency. For example, if I say these are my first student and this is my second students, the average marks of both the students, let's say, is at 20. Fine. But there is some variations. So average marks obtained by the student is 70 plus minus 2. That means 68 to 72. This is the marks obtained by the students. One is more consistent than the average marks obtained by the students from 50 to 90. Although you can say the average of both the cases is my 70. Average is same, but clearly say it has more variation, more spread. So if it has more spread, then it is less consistency. More dispersion implies less consistency. Therefore, the students whose marks between the 68 to 72 is more consistent as compared to the 70 plus minus 20. Like one more example, if I provide you, consider the three students A, B and C, and the marks obtained in their first test, marks obtained in their second test, and the marks obtained in the third test are represented as below. 50, fine. In the second case is a 50, 50, 50, while the third student is 60, 50 and 40. So according to you, which student is best student? Which student is the best one? Fine. So clearly say the student A is performing, they're increasing their marks. That means they are hard worker or they have improved their performance. While the student C is continuously degrading their marks from the first test to the second and the second to the third. And if you calculate the average of the student A, B and C, clearly say the average is a 50 of A, B and C students. So can you say all these three students behave similar? Definitely not. So इन तीनों में से किसका वेरिएशन कम है? Definitely the student B has less variation. So once it has a lower variation, it's a more consistent. That means the student B is more consistent as compared to the student A and B. How you can use the dispersion in case of the measuring the risk? Finance department, as I mentioned you, the example of the funds. Fine. So the finance department always use the variance and the standard deviation to quantify the uncertainty. How you can compare the two different data set? We can compare, if say this is my first data set, this is my second data set. I can compare the average of the first set, average of the second set. If average are my same, and then we can compute the dispersion of the first set, dispersion of the second set. Whichever the set has a less dispersion, that is more consistent as compared to the other sets. Similarly, you can control the quality of any product based on the dispersions, and you can make a better decisions based on the low variability. Low variability means low dispersions. What are the major characteristics for the satisfactory or called as a good measure of dispersions? So there are the 6 major characteristics which you can keep in your mind when you are talking about the measure of dispersion. The first one is it should be well defined. Fine. Second is it must be based on all the observations. Like if I have the say 5 numbers, then all these 5 numbers must be used in the calculating of the measure of dispersions. Similarly, it must be easy to calculate. It should be capable of the further algebraic treatments, and it should be less affected by the fluctuation of the sampling. What are the various kinds of the measure of dispersions? We have classified into the 2 categories. The first one is absolute, second is a relative. The absolute measures covers a range, quartile deviation, mean deviation, variance, and the standard deviations. And all these absolute have their proper units. If you have the x1, x2, x3 all are in my kgs, fine, then whatever the answer you have obtained, they must be in terms of the kg. But what is the meaning of the relative? Whenever you want to make a product as a unitless, then we can always use as the relative measures. So that for that case, we can use as the coefficient of the variation. And that coefficient of variation is one of the most important topic. What are the important points that you have to keep in mind? First of all, the mean alone is not sufficient to describe the information. Dispersion is always measurement of the spread. Small dispersion means the more consistent, more stability. Large dispersion means there is a large variability, or we can say that there is a large uncertainty. Out of these measures, the range is one of the simplest measures, while the variance and the standard deviation is the most popular measure of the dispersions. Coefficient of the variation is always used when you compare the 2 different data sets. Like if I say this is my product A, which are measuring in terms of the kgs. Second product is a length, which are measuring in the centimeter. So how you can compare them? Because both have the different units. So whenever you want to compare, you can always prefer for the coefficient of the variations. And dispersion is widely used, as I mentioned you, in the manufacturing, finance, engineering, and many more case studies. So what is the summary of that? The measure of the center tendency, that is a mean, median, and the mode, tell us only about where the data is located. However, the measure of dispersion tell us how the widely data is spread about the central tendency. So whenever you have a center tendency, mean, median, mode, you can compute as a dispersions like range, quartiles, standard deviation, variance. Based on the center tendency and the dispersions, we can always make a better decisions and better understandings. So as out of all these different measures, we can start from the first lecture, that is a range, in our next part. Fine. So if you are really interested to learn the concept of the range, let me know in the comment box. I will upload for you very soon. Till then, you can share this video with your friends, like and comment on the videos. Best of luck, students. Thanks for the watching.